Hi everyone. It was lovely to see you all on week one of the course. So for week two, I'm just making a little video around why yoga is so helpful for stress and anxiety. Now you may have noticed that in the West, when we are looking at stress and anxiety, it can be very much from a medical perspective. So we might look at the symptoms of the stress and anxiety and maybe deal with those through a kind of medical model of practice. This is gradually changing, thankfully, but it's very dependent on who you're working with and who maybe you see at your medical practice. So, yoga takes on a much more holistic approach, and this is because in Eastern philosophy, they view the body very differently, and they view humans as beings made up of different layers or sheaths, as they call it. So we can use this to help us look at a kind of framework to help us understand and maybe reflect on what each of our layers needs, understanding that each is interconnected and will impact each other. Now, this does not rely on us changing our spiritual beliefs or taking on any religious beliefs. It's just a different approach which can help us to maybe shine light a little bit on what's going on for us. So, for the health of our body and our mind, our lifestyle, past experiences, and we can use this knowledge to support our understanding of how to bring balance to our whole self. So, the different layers that they talk about, and we can use our little Russian dolls to help us kind of think about it within our minds. So the first layer is called our food layer, and that's really our physical body, muscles, bones, organs. And we can think of it, and it's the food layer because we literally are what we eat. So we eat a banana, we take in the banana, the nutrients that come from the banana become part of us. And we can access this through movement within our yoga practice. So we've got our first layer, and then we have our second layer, which is our energy layer, which is our nervous system. And this is accessed through our breath. So, specifically, as we talked about in the first week, that autonomic nervous system and how important that is for our functioning. And then we have our third layer, and this is the mind layer, or manos as it's called in yogic terms, and it's like that chattering mind, and it's the senses, all the different information coming in from the senses, past experiences, emotions are part of this layer. And then our fourth layer is our wisdom layer, our intuition, our knowledge, our that discerning observer, our witness. So that place where we make decisions with real clarity and quite decisiveness, and we feel quite clear about the decisions that we make. So we're not coming from a place of emotion, but a place of discernment. When we are unbalanced in the first three, so in our physical layer, our nervous system, and the mind body, it's really difficult to connect to this wisdom. And you can imagine that the wise owl is very quiet. So that place of logic and clarity is very quiet because the guard dog is very loud and barking because we're potentially not quite in balance. Um, and when we are balanced, you will notice that because you work from a place of clarity and certainty. Now, the fifth layer, which is the hardest layer for us to maybe feel like we can access, is what's called our bliss layer. Our wee bliss layer right at the center. And this is the joy, that connectedness, and we might feel glimmers of this. You know, those moments where you feel totally at one with things, you feel completely joyful. It's it's bliss. It's literally a feeling of bliss, and we can have glimmers of these things. But as you know, we or may know, we have a real negative bias as humans beings. And so we may remember negative things much more easily than we do those joyous things. So it might take us quite a bit of effort to remember, to remind ourselves about those glimmers. Again, very hard to access if we're not feeling balanced in our physical, our energy layer, and our mind layer. So these layers, they're not separate. Obviously, as we can see from the Russian dolls, they look quite separate, but they're not separate. They're interconnecting. They're all part of the same system, all connected, and one can't exist without the other, and they all overlap and impact each other. So yoga works with each of the layers, which is very important when working with stress and anxiety, as it affects us physically, emotionally, and psychologically. So here I've made a little table just explaining the different layers, the impact of stress and anxiety, and what kind of practices, maybe lifestyle things that we can do to support us to find more balance. So it's a wee bit tricky to see on this screen, but I will give you a copy so that you can have a little look. So our physical layer, that outer layer of the body, the muscles, and how it might be impacted. So, muscle tension, fatigue, digestive issues, low immunity, so becoming quite unwell quite often, issues with sleep, postural alignment, back pain, chronic pain. I mean, the list is really endless, and you will have had your own experiences of how this impacts that physical body. And we can use our movement within our practice, our breath work will all impact those specific things. So, say muscle tension, using our breath can help us to relax and calm the body down. You can also, some lifestyle changes, really good sleep hygiene. Sleep, obviously, is such an important aspect within our life. Food choices, what substances we're putting into our body will all impact our physical body. So, our next layer, our energy layer, so our nervous system. So we might notice this is impacted by the fact we might be over breathing. So we might be taking quite a lot of breaths in a minute. Now, if people are not focusing on their breath work, then the likelihood is they will be over breathing. I would suggest that most of the general population over breathe. Reverse breathing. So as I talked about last week, as we inhale, we want our belly to rise. And as we exhale, we want our belly to draw towards the spine. Now, reverse breathing does the opposite. So as we inhale, the belly draws to the spine. And as we exhale, the belly rises. And you will notice if you're really stressed, this is how you might have that breath pattern. And it means we're really breathing into our chest. We're hyperventilating. And you might not notice that unless you take a moment to check in with your breath. And that's why it's so important just to pause, to notice, to see how we're breathing in our bodies today. Carbon dioxide intolerance can be, which means that it would be really difficult for us to maybe take a pause in our breath. And again, we'll encourage our system to overbreathe. Hormonal imbalances, digestive issues, sleep disturbances. So if our nervous system is out of balance, it will impact pretty much all our different systems within the body. So we can support this with our calming breath work. So our 1 to 2 breathing. So we're going to be doing that in week 2, extending our exhale. And that has a really positive impact on our nervous system. Our exhale is governed by our parasympathetic nervous system, our rest and digest nervous system. But we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through the course. Our diaphragmatic breathing, so if we're breathing from the diaphragm, now all breathing can be said to be diaphragmatic, but how effective that breath work is really, we need to strengthen that diaphragm and work from there. Nasal breathing, so breathing in and out through the nose. Our nose is a natural filter, so it gets rid of any nasty stuff that we're breathing in. But it also produces nitric oxide, which helps us to absorb oxygen, so we're taking more oxygen in if we're breathing in and out through the nose. Lots of benefits to nasal breathing. And just bringing awareness to our breath, just taking a moment to notice how we are breathing is helpful for our nervous system. So the next layer, our mind layer, that layer that's impacted by the chatter, the senses, the emotions. So we might notice this as being affected by stress and anxiety with the anxious mind, a ruminating mind, the worried, fearful, unhelpful, maybe self-soothing, so food, alcohol, drugs, scrolling on our phones. Decision making via emotions, and we might find decision making really, really difficult. Social anxiety, those negative habitual thoughts come back, those patterns that might be deeply ingrained within us, self limiting beliefs. And we might start reacting rather than responding. And we might react in a way that is how we might have reacted in the past due to different experiences that we've had. Chronic pain might be another way that an imbalance in our mind. So some of the things that we can do are calmic breath work again. So mindfulness, so some self-inquiry, noticing the patterns of thought. So we're noticing without judgment. That's where our mindfulness is. Loving kindness meditation, so bringing compassion, something that can be really tricky, but a really great practice. And it does require practice. We're going to be doing that on the course. Body scans, so bringing awareness to each of the different parts of our body, can bring focus and really a conscious awareness to the different parts of our body. Grounding movement practice, so finding that safety of the ground, can really help us to come out of that mind and be much more of an observer. Take a few pauses throughout the day to check in, mind, body, breath in a non-judgmental way. So again, our mindfulness practice, being mindful of what we consume through what we watch, listen to, and read, as these can deeply affect us. And I don't think I need to say much about that. I think you know, like with certain things that you watch really can stay with you, and not in a positive way. We can join a yoga class or an activity which builds community and social connection. And we will talk more about that kind of social connectedness and how important that can be, but how tricky it can feel to actually do that in moments of feeling stressed. So then we have our wisdom layer as we start getting more and more subtle. So we start out at the gross, our physical body, which is quite tangible, and then gradually we get more subtle and subtle as we move through the layers. So you might not be able to think straight. Decision making is difficult. You might feel quite disconnected to yourself. You might identify with your thoughts and feeling kind of out of control, and you're really maybe reactive to things. So we can support this by doing our body scans. So again, bringing that conscious awareness back to the body. So out of the mind and into the body. Yoga Nidra. So this is translated as yogic sleep. Mindfulness, and a movement practice building self-awareness. And then we move to that bliss layer. So this lovely bliss, joyful state. Now we're not going to feel this if we're stressed and anxious because we might be feeling pretty overwhelmed. Feelings of joylessness, despair, isolation and disconnected, socially anxious and pretty avoidant maybe of all anything social or anything really, really, maybe even leaving the house. So what can we do to help? So we can take time to really think of what gives us joy. We might need to really, really dig deep. What's given us joy, what's been those blissful moments, and maybe reflect on this, noticing our glimmers. And it can be really helpful maybe to note them down so that when you're feeling those in times of overwhelm, you've got something to kind of refer back to. Or I like to dot things about the house. Loving kindness meditation, again, is very helpful for bringing some self-compassion to ourselves. A gratitude practice, so noting 3 things that you're grateful for. And this does take practice. That's not really something that is a societal norm to go about talking about how grateful we are, especially in Scotland, you know. We love a bit of a good whinge. And again, not against that, but sometimes we need to bring back to, right, what is it right in front of us that we can be grateful for? And a joy practice. So noting down what's given you joy today. And you even know to note it down, you might take a moment just to think each day what has given you a little bit of joy today. And again, this is a practice because we have this negative bias quite naturally. And so it takes time. If we want to think of a joyful moment or we want to keep a nice memory, we're going to have to really take the time to process it and allow it to settle into the memory. If, you know, I get feedback if 99 out of 100 are really positive, I'm going to remember the one that was negative. And it's part of our survival system. So these are a few of the things that we can do, and we'll be working through them through our course. But I just wanted to give you this information because it can be helpful to reflect on, right? What are the different parts of me that might need a bit of support, and how can I support that? And I'm going to give you a sheet on Sunday that you can take home and maybe just take a few moments just to think about what it is that you can do for yourself. So I look forward to seeing you then. I hope the rest of the week is kind. And yeah, see you then. Bye.